What would make a mother push her own child into a river to save him? This is Moses. A prince who discovered his whole life was a lie. A man who ran. A shepherd who spent 40 years believing he was nobody. You're not one of us. You never were. That voice haunted him for 80 years. But what if the thing that disqualifies you is exactly why God chose you? You'll watch a mother let go of everything she loves. You'll see two brothers become enemies. You'll witness an 80-year-old man finally hear the one word he waited his whole life for. Mama. Stay until the end. Because this story will teach you that your weakness is not a wall. It's a door. If you've ever felt lost, broken, or not enough, this story is for you. Subscribe to ARC Films and join us. It means the world. Now, let's begin. Mitigates the torches moved closer. Jochebed could hear the soldiers laughing, kicking down doors, dragging babies from their mother's arms. She had minutes, maybe less. She looked at her son, 3 months old, eyes like dark honey. He didn't cry. He just watched her, trusting her completely. She held him to her chest one last time. She breathed him in, the warm scent of his skin, the weight of him in her arms, everything she was about to lose.
I am saving you by letting you go. Forgive me. Please forgive me.
The basket was ready. She had made it with her own hands, sealing every gap, praying over every thread. A tiny ark for a tiny life. She lowered him inside, his fingers wrapped around hers. She couldn't let go. Her hands wouldn't move. Miriam, only 9 years old, pulled at her mother's robe. Her voice was shaking but firm.
Mama, they're coming. You have to let go now.
Jochebed's fingers opened. The basket slid into the river. The current caught it and pulled it away, toward the place where Egyptians bathed, toward the enemy, toward the only chance he had. She collapsed into the reeds. She bit down on her own arm to stop the scream tearing through her chest. Miriam held her, a child comforting a mother, both watching the basket grow smaller and smaller.
My son. My son. My son.
The river carried him away, and Jochebed knew she would never hold her son the same way again. The basket drifted into the royal gardens. A woman's hand reached down and lifted the crying baby from the reeds. She was the daughter of Pharaoh, the same Pharaoh who had ordered every Hebrew boy thrown into the Nile. But when she looked at this child, she did not see a Hebrew. She saw a son.
I will call him Moses, drawn from the water. He will be mine.
Pharaoh allowed it. A Hebrew pet for his daughter. What harm could one baby do? Word spread through the slave quarters. A Hebrew woman was needed to nurse the child. Jochebed came to the palace with her head bowed, her heart slamming against her ribs. She held her own son again, but now as a servant. She fed him, she rocked him to sleep, and late at night, when the palace fell silent, she would carry him to the servants' quarters. She would listen for footsteps. Then she would sing.
Sleep now, my son, though they say you're not mine. The river was cruel, but God is kind. You are
was the only truth she could give him without losing him forever. The boy grew. He learned to walk on marble floors, to speak like royalty. And when he was old enough, he reached for the princess and said his first word.
Mother!
Jochebed's smile stayed frozen on her face. Her fingernails pressed into her palms until small red crescents appeared. She bowed and stepped backward into the shadows where servants belong. The boy became a young man dressed in gold and silk. He learned to read, he learned to fight, and he found a brother, Ramesses, the prince who would one day rule Egypt. They raced chariots through Memphis, laughing, shoving, inseparable. Two boys who believed the world belonged to them.
We'll rule Egypt together. You'll be my right hand, forever.
Moses believed him. He had no reason not to. He was a prince of Egypt. He had everything. But some nights, he heard a woman singing in the servants' quarters, a Hebrew melody, the same one over and over. He never saw who sang it. He never thought to ask. But every time he heard it, something in his chest ached, a hollow space he couldn't name. And he didn't know why. Moses was a man now, tall, strong, dressed in fine linen with gold on his wrists. He walked through the palace like he owned it, because he did. He had never known hunger. He had never felt a whip. He had never questioned who he was. Until the afternoon he wandered beyond the palace walls. The construction site stretched across the sand. Thousands of slaves hauled stones under a white sun. Moses had seen this before. He had never truly looked. Today, he looked. An Egyptian guard stood over a Hebrew slave, an old man who had collapsed beneath his load. The whip rose and fell, rose and fell. The old man curled into himself, too exhausted to scream anymore.
Please, please. I can't.
Something cracked open inside Moses. He was running before he understood why. His hands, soft hands, clean hands, hands that had never worked, grabbed the guard and threw him backward. The guard's head struck stone. Moses stood over the body. The man's eyes were open but saw nothing. Sand was already sticking to the blood pooling beneath his skull. Moses looked at his own hands. Golden rings, polished nails. Now red, wet, warm. He couldn't breathe. He staggered backward, mouth opening and closing without sound. Movement in the shadows. A younger Hebrew had been watching. Moses turned toward him, desperate for something, understanding, forgiveness, anything. The man's face held neither.
You wear their gold. You eat their food. One dead guard doesn't make you our brother. You're not one of us. You never were.
The words landed like stones in Moses' chest. He looked at the body. He looked at his hands. He looked toward the palace gleaming white in the distance. He couldn't go back. But he had nowhere else to go. He ran. Moses walked until his sandals fell apart. Days passed, maybe weeks. The desert stripped everything from him. His strength, his title, his name. The Prince of Egypt dissolved into sand and silence. He collapsed at a well in Midian, lips cracked, skin peeling. He waited to die. It seemed easier than remembering. The sound of laughter pulled him back. He opened his eyes. Shepherd girls stood at the well, trying to water their flock. A group of men shoved them aside, kicking over their jars, blocking them from the water. Moses closed his eyes again. It wasn't his fight. He was no one now. No one helps anyone. But his legs pushed him upright. His hands shoved the men back. He stood between the girls and the shepherds, swaying on his feet but unwilling to move. Something in his eyes made them leave without a word. Then his legs gave out.
You can barely stand, yet you fight for strangers. You're either very brave or running from something.
She knelt beside him and poured water over his cracked lips. Her father took him in out of gratitude, gave him sheep to tend, gave him a staff, simple wood, worn smooth by other hands, the tool of a nobody. Zipporah became his wife. A son was born. Moses held the baby against his chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat.
You will always know who you are. I'll make sure of it.
The words caught in his throat, a promise and a wound in the same breath. 40 years passed. Moses grew weathered and gray. He never looked east toward Egypt. He never spoke of marble floors or blood on clean hands. But at night, he still heard the voice. You're not one of us. You never were. He had almost convinced himself he had forgotten. Almost. A lamb wandered away from the flock. Moses followed it up the mountain, muttering under his breath. 80 years old and still chasing sheep. This was his life now. This was all he would ever be. Then he saw the light. A bush burned on the rocks above, but the leaves didn't blacken. The branches didn't curl. The fire danced without consuming. Impossible. Alive. Moses stepped closer. The air grew thick. The ground hummed beneath his sandals like something ancient was waking.
Moses, take off your sandals. You are standing on holy ground. I have seen my people suffering in Egypt. I have heard their cries. And I am sending you to bring them out.
Moses fell to his knees. His hands flew up to cover his face, the same hands that had once been covered in blood.
The last time I tried to help someone, a man stopped breathing. I ran. I've been running for 40 years. My tongue stumbles. My hands have done things. Please, send someone else. Anyone else.
He couldn't look at the fire. He couldn't look at anything. The flames blazed brighter. But when the voice came again, it was gentler, like a father speaking to a son who had forgotten his own name.
I knew you in the basket, Moses. I knew you in the palace. I knew you in the desert when you thought you were alone. You have never been lost. You have always been mine. Now go.
Moses wept. 40 years of shame cracking open. The lie he had carried since that day in the sand, "You're not one of us. You never were," began to crumble. He rose on unsteady legs. His staff felt different now, charged, ready. Egypt waited on the horizon, the place he had sworn never to return. But God had called him by name, and that changed everything. Moses stood before the palace gates. 40 years ago, he had run through them with blood on his hands. Now, he returned with nothing but a wooden staff and a message that could burn the world down. The throne room was vast and cold, gold everywhere, incense thick in the air. And there, on a throne of gold, sat Ramses. He was not the laughing boy from the chariot races. His face had hardened into stone, lines carved where laughter used to live. A golden serpent crowned his head. He did not rise.
40 years, not one word, not one message. And now you return for slaves?
Moses stepped forward. He spoke of the fire on the mountain, the voice, the god who had sent him to set his people free. Then Ramses descended the steps, slowly, each footfall deliberate. He stopped close enough to whisper.
Your people? I was your people. I called you brother. I would have given you half my kingdom, and you chose them over me.
His voice cracked on the word brother. For one breath, his eyes shone wet. The boy Moses remembered still alive somewhere beneath the stone. Then his jaw tightened. The wetness vanished. Only Pharaoh remained. Moses reached for his arm, the old gesture from their boyhood. Ramses pulled away like the touch was fire.
The boy I loved died the night you ran. You killed him. Pharaoh's answer is no.
He turned his back and climbed to his throne. Moses walked toward the doors. They slammed behind him like a tomb sealing shut. He didn't look back. If he had, he might have seen Ramses gripping the arms of his throne until his knuckles turned white. But Moses didn't look back, and he would never see his brother again, only his enemy. Moses raised his staff over the Nile. The water shuddered, then turned to blood. It had begun. Frogs swarmed from the rivers, into beds, into ovens, into the mouths of sleeping children. Gnats rose from the dust like living clouds. Flies blackened the sky. Livestock collapsed in the fields, their bodies bloating in the sun. Boils split open on the skin of rich and poor alike. Hail fell like fists from heaven. Locusts devoured what the hail had spared. Egypt was unraveling, and Moses watched it happen. He walked through Memphis after the hail. An Egyptian mother knelt in the street cradling a dead goat, her family's only milk. She looked up at Moses with eyes that didn't understand. He wanted to explain. He wanted to apologize. He kept walking. Then he thought, how much more, Lord? How much more until it's enough? But Ramses would not bend. Each plague hardened him further. His advisors begged him to release the Hebrews. He refused. His pride was louder than his people's screams. Then came the darkness. Not night, something deeper. A blackness that pressed against the skin like wet cloth. For 3 days, no one moved. No one spoke. On the third night, Ramses sent for him. No throne room, no guards, just a small chamber. 2 men who couldn't see each other's faces.
How much more, Moses? How much more until you've had your revenge?
This was never revenge. I wish you could believe that.
Make it stop. Please.
Silence. Then Ramses' voice again, cracked, stripped bare. For one breath, Moses heard his brother, the real one, still buried under all that pride. But when light returned, Pharaoh's heart was stone again. He told Moses to leave. He said the next time they met, one of them would die. Moses walked into the sunlight. He knew what was coming next. God had told him. He fell to his knees in the sand and begged for another way. Moses gathered the elders and told them what God had said. The final plague, the one that would break Pharaoh. Every firstborn son in Egypt would die before morning. The elders stared. Some nodded slowly, some wept. Moses stood hollow, the words echoing in his skull like stones dropping into a well. That night, he walked into the desert alone, past the tents, past the fires, past the sound of families preparing for a night they didn't yet understand. He climbed a ridge until he couldn't hear human voices anymore. Then he screamed.
The river turned to blood. The livestock fell. The sky went black. But this is something else. Children. You're asking me to stand by while children stop breathing in their beds.
He grabbed his staff and hurled it against the rocks. It clattered and bounced and lay still in the dust.
Is this who you are? Is this who you're making me?
No answer. Only the wind returning cold against his wet face. He fell forward, fingers clawing into the dirt. His shoulders heaved. 40 years of hiding, 80 years of questions. And now this weight, this impossible, crushing weight. He stayed there a long time. The stars wheeled overhead. His sobs became silence. His silence became stillness. When he finally lifted his head, nothing had changed. God had not answered. The command had not been withdrawn. Egyptian children would still die before dawn. Moses crawled to where his staff lay in the dust. The wood was cracked where it had struck the rocks. He picked it up anyway. He rose on unsteady legs, wiped the dirt from his face, began the walk back toward the fires. There was no other way, and he would carry this alone. The sun set red over Egypt. The Hebrews painted their doorframes with lamb's blood, still wet, catching the last light like dark jewels. They gathered their families inside. They packed everything they owned, and then they waited. Moses sat with his family in a borrowed house. His grandson crawled into his lap and tugged at his beard.
What's happening tonight, grandfather?
Moses pulled the boy close, feeling the small heartbeat against his chest.
Stay inside. Whatever you hear, don't open the door. Don't look.
The hours crawled. Oil lamps flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a dog began to howl. Then another. Then nothing. Then it came. Not thunder, not wind. Just a sound rising over Egypt. The wail of mothers discovering their children cold in their beds. One voice, then 10, then 10,000, bleeding into a single cry that had no end. Moses closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face and into his beard. He wept for the Hebrew slaves who had suffered 400 years. He wept for the Egyptian children who had done nothing wrong. He wept for the boy Ramses used to be. Dawn came gray and silent. Egypt was a tomb wrapped in mist. A messenger arrived. Pharaoh wanted Moses now. The throne room was empty. No guards, no advisors, just Ramses, sitting on the steps below his throne, holding his son. The boy was limp, skin the color of ash. Ramses rocked him slowly, back and forth, the way a father rocks a baby to sleep. But this child would never wake. He didn't look up when Moses entered.
Take your people. Take your God. Leave my land.
His voice was hollow, a broken instrument. Moses couldn't move. He had seen Ramses proud, angry, hard as stone. Never this. A man emptied of everything except grief. Ramses lifted his eyes, red and dry, beyond tears.
I hope this haunts you every night, every dream, until the day you die.
Moses turned and walked away. Behind him, the sound of Ramses weeping. Raw, animal, alone. Moses kept walking. Some victories feel like funerals. 600,000 people walked out of Egypt. Men carried bundles on their backs. Women balanced jars on their heads. Children clutched their parents' robes. The elderly leaned on the young. They carried bread that hadn't risen. They carried everything they owned. They carried 400 years of chains, finally broken. For the first time in generations, they were not property. but freedom didn't feel safe. It felt like walking off a cliff in the dark. Then the ground began to shake. Moses turned. Dust rose on the horizon like a brown wave. Then the glint of metal. Then the thunder of hooves. Chariots. Hundreds of them. Ramses had changed his mind. The people screamed. The sea stretched before them, endless, gray, impassable. The army closed behind, fast, armored, merciless. Trapped.
You led us out here to die. We should have stayed slaves.
Moses faced the sea. His staff trembled in his grip, the same cracked wood he had picked up from the dust. He closed his eyes.
I am not enough. I was never enough.
Then a voice, not thunder, but a whisper that filled his whole chest.
You were never supposed to be.
Moses opened his eyes. The words unlocked something. He had spent 80 years believing he needed to be enough. But God had never asked him to be enough. God only asked him to lift the staff. He raised his staff. The wind came like a roar. It slammed into the water and tore it apart. Walls of sea rose on either side, trembling, impossible, alive. Fish hung frozen in the deep. The seafloor stretched before them, dry as bone.
Go. Now.
600,000 ran, mothers clutching babies, old men stumbling forward. No one looked back. The last Hebrew reached the far shore as the first chariot entered the path. Moses lowered his staff. The walls collapsed. The sea remembered what it was. Chariots tumbled, horses cried out and went silent. When it was over, the water lay calm, as if nothing had happened. On the far shore, the people stood gasping, weeping, laughing, alive, free. Miriam stepped forward, the girl who had watched a basket float away 80 years ago. She lifted a tambourine.
Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously.
One voice joined her, then 10, then 600,000. The first free song in 400 years. Moses climbed a dune away from the celebration. He needed to feel the weight of everything settle. Below, the people danced. Miriam's tambourine flashed in the firelight. Footsteps behind him, slow, unsteady in the sand. An old woman climbed toward him, white hair glowing in moonlight, frail and bent. She'd been climbing toward him her whole life.
I never got to tell you. All those years in the palace, singing to you, watching you grow. I wanted to scream that I was your mother. But I stayed silent, so you could live. I never got to hear you call me mother.
Moses took her hand, thin fingers, fragile as bird bones.
I know, Mama. I think I always knew. The song every night. I never saw your face. But I heard you.
She leaned into him. Softly, she began to hum the lullaby from the palace.
Sleep now, my son, though they say you're not mine. The river was cruel, but God is kind.
Moses looked at the sea, silver under the moon. Somewhere beneath that water, a basket had once carried a baby toward an impossible future.
Was it worth it?
Yes, Mama. It was worth it.
She smiled. Mother and son, finally. The story of Moses teaches us profound lessons about identity, failure, and a God who doesn't give up on broken people. Moses ran into the desert and hid for 40 years, believing he was nobody, belonging nowhere. Yet God found him in that wilderness and called him by name. Here's the first truth. Your past does not disqualify you. Your worst failure is not the end of your story. It's often the beginning of something greater. But Moses had another problem. He stuttered. He felt unworthy. He stood before a burning bush and begged God to send someone else. And God didn't argue with him. He simply said, "I will be with you." Here's the second truth. Your weakness is not a wall. It's a door. It's where God's strength walks in. And Moses was 80 years old when his purpose finally began. 80. If you think you've wasted too much time, if you think your moment has passed, it hasn't. It's never too late. Jochebed teaches us the hardest lesson of all. She placed her baby in a basket and pushed him into the river, not because she didn't love him, but because she loved him more than her own need to hold him. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is open your hands and trust God with what you cannot control. Ramses reminds us that pride protects nothing. He had every chance to yield. Every plague was an invitation to humble himself. But he held on tighter with each one. And in the end, he lost everything he was trying to protect. Those who refuse to bend will eventually break. Moses points forward to Jesus, the one who leads us not just out of slavery to Pharaoh, but out of slavery to fear, shame, and death itself. Your weakness is not your disqualification. It is your invitation. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to ARC Films. It means the world to us. And tell us, which Bible story should we tell next?